Picture this. You're standing in a Roman marketplace, and a merchant hands you your weekly wages. But instead of coins, he gives you salt. Yes, salt. That's actually where we get the word salary, from the Latin word salarium, the salt allowance given to Roman soldiers. Now, I know what you're thinking. Salt? Really? That stuff sitting in my kitchen shaker controlled empires. Absolutely. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why nations went to war over it, why it funded revolutions, and why controlling salt meant controlling the world. Here's something that'll blow your mind. Throughout most of human history, salt was worth more per ounce than gold in some regions. The Great Wall of China, partially financed by salt taxes. The French Revolution, salt taxes were one of the sparks. Gandhi's march to Indian independence started with salt. This humble mineral has crashed economies, crowned kings, and literally shaped the map of our world. Cities rose where salt deposits existed. Trade routes sprawled across continents following the white gold. And empires lived and died by their control of salt. So buckle up, because we're about to trace 5,000 years of human civilization through the lens of the most valuable seasoning in history. First, let's answer the obvious question. Why was salt so incredibly valuable? Think about life before refrigeration. You've just hunted or harvested your food, and you need it to last through winter. Without salt, you're looking at maybe a few days before everything rots. With salt, months, even years. Salt was literally the difference between survival and starvation. But here's where it gets fascinating. Humans also need salt to survive. We lose it through sweat, and our bodies can't produce it. Early agricultural societies, unlike nomadic hunter-gatherers who got salt from meat, faced a genuine salt crisis. You could have all the grain in the world, but without salt, your population would suffer seizures, muscle cramps, and eventually death. So salt wasn't just valuable, it was absolutely essential. And here's the kicker. Unlike food that you can grow anywhere, salt deposits are geographically concentrated. If you controlled salt, you controlled survival itself. That's power in its purest form. Let's jump to ancient China, around 250 BCE. The state of Qi figured something out that would echo through millennia. If you tax salt, you tax everyone. Rich, poor, farmer, merchant, everyone needs salt. The Han Dynasty took this to another level, creating the world's first salt monopoly. The government didn't just tax salt. They controlled its entire production and distribution. Imagine the economic power. A guaranteed revenue stream from every single citizen. The Han used this wealth to fund massive armies, build infrastructure, and maintain one of history's greatest empires for over 4 centuries. But here's where it gets really interesting. The salt monopoly didn't just fund the empire, it created an entire bureaucratic system. Officials were appointed to manage salt production. Inspectors roamed the countryside to prevent smuggling. An entire government apparatus grew around salt. Sound familiar? It's the blueprint for modern taxation systems. Meanwhile, in Africa, the trans-Saharan trade routes were moving salt southward and gold northward. The city of Timbuktu grew wealthy as a salt trading hub. In the markets of West Africa, salt was literally traded pound for pound with gold. Caravans of camels carried massive salt blocks across the Sahara. A journey so dangerous that losing a third of your caravan was considered acceptable. Now let's talk about Rome, because the Romans understood salt like nobody else. The Via Salaria, the Salt Road, was one of ancient Rome's most important routes, carrying salt from the coastal salt pans at Ostia into the heart of Italy. Control this road, and you controlled access to salt for the entire region. Roman generals knew that cutting off an enemy's salt supply was as effective as a siege. But Rome's genius was in systematizing salt taxation across its entire empire. Every conquered territory was assessed for salt resources, and Roman administrators quickly established control. The salt tax became one of the empire's most reliable revenue sources, funding the legions that expanded and protected Roman territory. Here's a mind-blowing fact. When Jesus said, "You are the salt of the earth," everyone in his audience immediately understood he was talking about essential value and preservation. Salt wasn't just a metaphor, it was the standard by which worth was measured. Fast forward to medieval Europe, and salt had become even more valuable. The herring trade in the Baltic Sea created immense wealth for the Hanseatic League, but only because salt preserved the fish for transport. Cities like Lübeck and Hamburg rose to power not because of the fish, but because they controlled the salt necessary to preserve them. Venice, yes, the famous city of canals, built its maritime empire largely on salt. The Venetians controlled salt production across the Adriatic and Eastern Mediterranean. They manipulated prices, created artificial shortages, and used salt as a diplomatic weapon. Cross Venice and suddenly your salt supply dries up. Your fish rots, your meat spoils, and your population grows restless. In France, the gabelle, the salt tax, became one of the most hated impositions in the kingdom. By the 1700s, it varied wildly by region, creating a massive black market. Smugglers called faux sonneurs risked execution to move salt across provincial borders. Thousands were sent to the galleys for salt smuggling. The resentment this created? It fed directly into the French Revolution. When the revolutionary government abolished the gabelle in 1790, people literally danced in the streets. But my favorite salt story? Gandhi's Salt March of 1930. The British colonial government in India held a complete monopoly on salt production and sales. Indians couldn't collect or sell salt independently. They had to buy it from the British at British prices with a heavy tax attached. For one of the world's hottest countries, where people needed salt to survive, this was both economically crushing and symbolically insulting. So Gandhi, in a stroke of brilliant political theater, walked 240 miles to the sea and picked up a lump of natural salt. That's it. He just picked up salt from the beach, something technically illegal under British law. Within weeks, tens of thousands of Indians were making salt illegally, and the British were arresting them by the thousands, including Gandhi himself. The absurdity of a great empire arresting people for making salt created international outrage. This simple act of picking up salt became a catalyst for Indian independence. Think about that. The same substance that built empires also helped tear one down. So what happened? How did we go from empires rising and falling over it to this? 2 words: technology and geology. The Industrial Revolution gave us mechanical drilling and steam-powered mining. We could suddenly tap into the massive, ancient underground salt beds that exist on every continent. We didn't need to control a single coastline or caravan route anymore. We could just dig it up, anywhere. Salt went from being a scarce, localized resource to a global, cheap commodity. The magic was gone. The power was broken. Today, salt is so cheap and abundant that we barely think about it. We put it on our tables without a second thought. But for thousands of years, salt was the invisible hand guiding human civilization. It determined where cities were built. It funded empires and sparked revolutions. It created trade networks spanning continents and motivated exploration of new worlds. Wars were fought over it. People died for it, killed for it, and eventually overthrew empires because of it.